So this is going to be a quick walkthrough of your typical POH or Pilot Operating Handbook. You can access similar documents such as this one by going into the General Library in the Course Information module of our class. And you can also buy physical copies of these books for whatever aircraft you're flying online from places like Amazon, eBay, or sporties.com. Some of them are harder to find than others. But these books are going to be ones that you will refer back to over and over in your flight training. And as you transition from one airplane to another throughout your career, then the POH for the aircraft that you are flying is always going to be one of the very first resources that you reach for to start getting oriented. It's also one of those things that you're going to want to be able to make use of in your future interviews. When you are going to go fly for a company, then they expect you to know about the plane that you're going to be working on, right? So having a knowledge of what's in here is very important in general. Another thing before we kind of get started here that I want to bring up is the fact that I've taught all levels of pilots from student all the way through commercial, and there have been many times when I'm teaching commercial level students and they cannot answer basic questions about their airplane POH for me. And it becomes abundantly clear that even though for your commercial certificate, then you will be flying the same plane typically that you're flying now. If you're doing single engine commercial initial, you'll be flying like a Cessna 152 or a 172. And so these are planes that these people have been flying sometimes for a couple years, and they've never bothered to actually learn the things in the POH. They've never actually opened it up to anything beyond those very basic tables needed to complete an initial flight manifest, which is just kind of both worrisome and unacceptable. So let's make sure that you guys don't end up in that position and get you going in the right track right away. So my cat is about to knock over my computer. Okay, so let's scroll through here, and I'm going to point out a few things for you. Most newer POHs, this does not hold true for some of the very early ones, but most newer POHs are going to be laid out in a pretty standard format. So the first chapter is going to be general information, and then you're going to have a chapter of limitations, emergency procedures, normal, performance, weight and balance, systems, maintenance, and extra optional equipment. So let's look at what each of those sections means for you. Also, typically, you're going to have a cheat sheet of some common information at the very beginning of your POH, which is a helpful thing to know about if you are, for example, on a progress check or a check ride and you just need a quick number to answer a question, then chances are it might be something that you could find right here. So let's talk about what you can find in section 1, general. This is going to be general information. What kind of engine does your plane have? The propeller, what kind of fuel does it take? What kind of oil? This is definitely an area that you're going to want to be highlighting a bunch of information in. Don't highlight in a way that covers the words though. But you're going to want to make flashcards out of a lot of these values. For example, especially your fuel capacity and your engine specs, things like that, which we'll talk more about in Zoom, okay? It also has important data like how much weight can your plane have. It's got definitions for different abbreviations in it. So if there's an abbreviation or a term that you don't know, then it's probably written there. Now, limitations, section 2 is exactly what it sounds like, things that cannot be exceeded. So there's a little bit of redundancy in the information that you'll be presented. So some of the things that you'll see here will be the V speeds. V stands for velocity, and so these are just speeds that are important for you as a pilot to know, and part of this course will be where you guys are memorizing the V speeds for the specific airplane that you are training in. And we'll do that when we start studying the airspeed indicator in the next module. But for now, just kind of know where they are. And again, you're going to see presented to you your aircraft's weight limits and power plant limits. So that's where that redundancy is that I mentioned earlier. Required placards and signs, things like that are here as well. Now this, section 3, this is a place that I really want to draw your attention to, okay? So if you're flying, for example, at Hillsborough Air Academy, and this is probably true at a number of other flight schools as well, then you'll typically be offered company checklists for your plane, little kind of abbreviated checklists to, and my cat knocked out a bunch of things. Okay. Abbreviated checklists for use in the plane that you can kind of stick on a kneeboard, or maybe they'll have a book of them available to you. And those are great. Okay, they're very handy, they're good for memorizing and practicing, and at Hillsborough Aero, then the emergency procedures checklist offers you a summary of the most common emergencies. I don't know how uplifting that sounds, but the emergencies that we train on, okay? Engine failures, things like that. But you only have an abbreviated checklist form in front of you, something that looks similar to this, where it's some bullet points, right? It doesn't tell you the why behind each action item, it just tells you that they are action items to know and follow. If you come into the POH, however, then after a list of those abbreviated procedures, you also have amplified versions, longer versions of those same emergency procedures that give you the why behind each step, so that if you're ever actually in an emergency situation, then you have that broader perspective to know, okay, the checklist is calling for me to do this, and this is why. And 9 times out of 10, the correct thing will be to do the checklist item. However, if you know why it's being called for, you can also know if you are that one time when maybe you should do something different because of your specific situation, right? And that critical thinking, that's why we need pilots. That's that human addition that you bring to every flight. And it's hard to make an informed decision if you don't have a complete set of information to make that decision off of. Another thing that I want to point out to you is that within these within the POH itself, you can find some less common emergency scenarios, like for example, landing with a flat main tire, or what do you do if you accidentally fly into icing, or what do you do if the door pops open during flight? How do you ditch in water? Okay, now hopefully you will not need to ditch in water, and the ditching procedures are actually not on the Hillsborough Aero Academy emergency checklists. However, should you have at least once in your life read the ditching procedures for your airplane? Yeah, probably a good idea, right? So just whatever plane you're flying, make sure that you have actually read through all, even the obscure emergency procedures at least once, just in case. So there's that for you. Another thing, let's get through. Okay, section 4 is where you can find normal procedures. That is an ugly arrow. That's a little bit better. Oof. Gonna have to get better at drawing on a screen, everyone. So normal does not mean unimportant. It just means normal, routine procedures, right? And now my cat is tearing up my office carpet. Whew, okay, working from home, you know what I mean? You guys feel me? All right, so normal procedures include, for example, pre-flight and what you're looking for when you're doing that. And once again, if you're flying, for example, at Hillsborough Air Academy, then they have company-produced checklists that walk you through bullet point versions of a pre-flight. For example, it looks like probably something similar to what you're seeing right here, okay? Maybe even a little less detailed than this, actually. However, you're missing the why. And the same logic applies here as applied in the emergency procedures. Those amplified versions of these shortened checklists are so important for you to read through at least once so that you know why you're looking for what you're looking for. Right? And why you're doing what you're doing during takeoff and warm up and everything else. And you can also see the procedures for some less common situations that probably aren't on the company issued versions of these checklists, such as what do you do if you're starting the plane and it's really, really hot outside or really, really cold outside? How does that change things? So again, I want to make sure that you guys are taking the time to read through this. This is not something that I'm grading you on, but you're not here for a grade, right? This is not a normal college class. You're here because you want to be a pilot. If you want to be a pilot, you need to read your POH. Done. Okay, so that's section 4, and it goes on for a while. Section 5 is performance. So this is a series of charts that you will use to figure out the performance characteristics and capabilities of your airplane. For now, well, normally at this point I say for now, just learn the charts that your flight instructor will go over with you in order to get the plane off the ground and start your flight training. But since PCC students, as far as I know, you guys are not at this moment in-flight courses actively flight training, just know that we will together as a class learn every single one of these charts and how to use them during that last third of the term. And we're also going to learn the ASA test prep equivalents of each of these charts, which is a whole different fun skill set. But every chart is helpful, some more helpful than others, but these are the things that you're going to come to when you are planning a cross-country flight, for example. Section 6 is your weight and balance data, which we will again learn everything in this section when we're studying weight and balance in that last third of the term. And finally, let me keep on scrolling. There we go. Section 7. This is the one that directly applies to the content that we're studying right now, systems. And so a lot of the diagrams that you're going to see in the PowerPoints were pulled directly from this. This is my source material for a lot of the content in this first couple modules here. So if you're wondering if you want to fact check me, or if maybe you're flying a plane that's different than a 152, maybe you're flying a 150 or a 172 or something just a little bit different, then this is where you're going to come in your particular POH to see what differences there are between what might be on my PowerPoints and what you are actually working with in real life, okay? And so this is very important, and also going back to, for example, future interviews and things like that, the systems chapter of any aircraft POH is so important for pilots to, and just expected for pilots to be really familiar with at a pretty high level. And one of the homework assignments, you guys might remember, is going to be to learn to draw your fuel system. That diagram can be found here for you. There's also usually a basic electrical diagram that you can look at. Your heater system, which we'll talk about if we haven't already. Vacuum system diagram is in here. And then after this, you get to, well, possibly not in this POH, but then you get to a section typically for supplemental products. And so those are kind of the essential sections that I want you to be aware of, and I want you to, on your own time, look into and start highlighting your way through some of the important data, which we can talk about what's important and what's not over Zoom, I guess, or in Flight Lab. If you're in Flight Lab, then that would also be a great place where you could ask questions, and we can kind of spend a little bit of extra time on this if anybody's interested. Okay, so I hope that was somewhat helpful for everybody, and I will see you in class.